And good morning, good morning, good morning. How's everybody doing? It is your favorite Psychology 118 Professor Dr. Chris Roddenberry streaming to you live from my office on South Campus. How's everybody doing today? If you're in my audience, please type me a hello in the chat bar. I'm going to type you one right now. Why don't you type me one back? And looks like we've got one or two people in our audience. Small crowd, but you know what? It's a small class. If you're there, go ahead and type a hello in and let me know you are here this morning. Good to see everybody. Good to see everybody. All right, fantastic. All right, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about today's class. Okay, today we are talking about the second half of Chapter 1. And today we're going to be talking about the factors that are related to happiness. We're actually going to be talking about a branch of psychology that is interested in studying people's well-being and happiness that's called positive psychology. And yes, you can study happiness scientifically. And we're going to talk about the factors that are surprisingly related and unrelated to happiness. And then we're going to talk a little bit about study habits and how you can improve your reading comprehension and your study strategies so that you can be a better student here at Wake Tech. Okay, I see that we have Eric Ayala in the classroom. Hi, Eric, how you doing? Go ahead, Eric, tell me if you would. Would you consider yourself to be a happy person? Exceedingly happy, average happy, or not so happy? And more importantly, Eric, what do you think is most important in determining whether or not a person is happy? What do you think? What is it that makes a person happy? What's the most important thing for happiness? What do you think? What makes people happy? Any ideas, Eric? Who knows? I'm going to give you a minute to maybe type in the chat bar if you would. Eric, what do you think is most important for making a person happy? Go ahead and let me know. All right, or whoever else is in the chat bar. Okay, here's the deal. Let's talk about happiness. And I'm going to, I noticed that my screen here is a little bit in the way. Let me go ahead and make it a little smaller. Average happy. People who are doing things that they like to do. Does that include jobs? Can you be happy because of a job, or is a job always something you don't want to do, Eric? What do you think? Can a job make you happy? I'd be curious. So, there are tons and tons. Oh, hello, Caleb. Good to see you. It was nice to see you in class tonight. Thanks for showing up today. Eric and I were talking a little bit about happiness. And what do you think is the most important thing for making people happy? What really makes people happy? Or just being alone? Oh, so it depends. Some people are happier when they're alone. Some people are happier when they're with other people. I'd say that's a good theory. That's a good theory. You know what? There are tons of common sense hypotheses about the roots of happiness, but many of these theories and hypotheses are actually wrong. Did you know there is a branch of psychology that's dedicated to measuring human well-being, which is happiness is a part of well-being, and these researchers are interested in understanding the qualities of life that contribute to well-being and happiness. In order to help people have healthy and functional lives, one of the things we need to do is to scientifically figure out what it is that makes people happy. And these positive psychology researchers have demonstrated scientifically and with measurement and observation which things are most important for determining people's happiness. And you know what? I forget what the name of it is. Hold on real quick. Let me look. I actually have an article, a TED Talk in your Week 1 resources folder. Okay, you can go to your chapter resources folder. Hold on, let me see. I'm not sure. Do I have it pulled up here? No, I don't. That's fine. No big deal. There is actually a TED Talk. About happiness by a fellow named Dan Gilbert. Why we make decisions on happiness. And we'll talk about that actually a little bit later. Actually, there's another article I don't have in here. 3 things your mama told you about happiness that might surprise you. So it's kind of interesting, the things that make people happy or not happy. So, what isn't very important for making people happy? Money, it turns out, is not as important as you would think. Now, in this TED Talk that I've got shared for you in the course resources folder, that's not entirely true. Poverty makes people sad. But what happens is it turns out that after about the first $60,000 or $70,000 a year, happiness does not increase very much. So there's no point in the line where being richer will make you more unhappy, but happiness seems to top out at about $60,000. So I can actually show you. So happiness, we can put that on the Y chart, and yearly income, and what you're going to find is that happiness tends to peak about $60K a year. So happiness goes straight up, but once people reach about $60,000, their happiness doesn't get any higher. After 60K, happiness doesn't increase. So no, folks, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, all those people who are super wealthy, you know what? They are not any happier than you are. You need a certain amount of money to take care of the basic necessities, but after you get the basic necessities, it turns out money is not all that important for determining your happiness. Some people say that being young makes you happy, and when you get old and weaker, you're not as happy. You know what? It turns out that global estimates of happiness show that age does not predict happiness. Grandparents can be just as happy as teenage kids. Does gender, are males happier than females? Are females happier than males? You know what? It turns out that gender is not related to your feelings of subjective well-being. Okay? Hello, Ivelisse. It's good to see you. Thanks for coming today. We're talking a little bit about positive psychology, which is the scientific study of well-being and happiness. And what we're talking about is the things that do not necessarily affect your level of happiness. And you might not believe it, Ivelisse, but money doesn't necessarily make you happier. As I was showing earlier, it turns out after you make a certain amount of money, happiness doesn't really increase. As long as we have enough money for the basics, food, a place to stay, most people's happiness doesn't seem to get any better. So if you're thinking about taking that job, moving on from that $70,000 job to that $200,000 job where you're going to have to work much more, think about your happiness rather than the money. It might be kind of surprising, but it is the truth. Does being a parent make you any happier? Absolutely not. There are some aspects of parenthood that make you happier, but you know what? It turns out that there are a lot of aspects of parenthood that make you unhappy as well. If you go to that TED Talk, The Things Your Mother Never Told You About Happiness, by Dan Gilbert, that I have in the course resources folder, you're going to see that being a parent, having children, doesn't necessarily make you a happier person. You know what? Some researchers have also looked at the link between intelligence. Does being more intelligent make you a happier person? Or on the other hand, sometimes we say ignorance and bliss. Some people think that being more intelligent might make you less happy. You know what? It turns out that intelligence does not necessarily make you more or less happiness. And here's one final thing. It turns out you might think, wow, beautiful people have such awesome lives. I know you folks probably spend your time looking at Facebook and Instagram and seeing all of your attractive friends taking attractive selfies. And you say, wow, if I could only be as beautiful as Mary Sue or Tommy Joe, I would be the happiest person in the world. Did you know that while attractive people do enjoy many advantages in society, happiness is not one of them? So, positive psychology has really allowed us to see that there are some things we think are related to happiness that do not actually predict happiness. Having more money, being better looking, being smarter, these things are not related to your overall feeling of happiness. Being a parent, nope, not going to make you happy. Being young, not going to make you happy as well. So these are the things that aren't as important for making people happy. You know what? What is somewhat important? Being healthy. I don't know if you've ever heard, as long as you have your health, things will be okay. You know what? There is a positive correlation between health and happiness, and it is stronger than the correlation between money and happiness. So being healthy is going to make you a happier person. But you know what? There are people who have chronic illnesses who still find a way to be happy. There are some people who are incredibly healthy and yet are very, very sad. So health is somewhat important to making you happy. Eric, you were talking about spending time with friends, social relations. You know what? You're kind of right. People who are satisfied with their friendships and socially active do tend to report having above average levels of happiness. Now, here's the key. As you mentioned, Eric, some people would prefer to be alone. So it's people who are satisfied with their friendships. If you're satisfied with only one friend or two friends or no friends, then you can be a happy person. It's when you don't have as many friends as you want. Loneliness is a subjective feeling. Some people have hundreds of friends and still feel lonely. Some people only have one friend, but that friend meets all of their social needs and they don't feel lonely at all. So if you have the level of social interaction that you want, that tends to make you a happy person. So ask yourself, am I healthy? Do I have the number and intimacy of friendships that I want? If you do, these will make you a happier person. Now, here's the deal. It turns out, and I don't want to spoil the party or ruin anything for anybody, but I'm not particularly religious myself. However, people with religious beliefs with sincere religious convictions, do tend to be more happy than those people who are adrift without a sense of spirituality. All right. Now, does it matter what religion? Absolutely not. Hindu, Christian, Muslim, Rastafarian, whatever religious, spiritual beliefs you have. It turns out that people who have a spiritual belief, and most of the time you'll have a community of people that go along with that, people who have a religious and spiritual community and beliefs tend to be more happy than those people who don't. And if you were to take my developmental psychology class 241, one of the things that really predicts older people's well-being and happiness is if they have religious belief. Now, leisure activity does tend to relate with a sense of subjective well-being. However, if you watch the 3 things that your mother never told you about happiness in the course resources folder, you're going to see that this is not as strong as you might think. Some of you think, hey, boy, if I could only win the lottery and spend the rest of my life living on a beach enjoying cocktails, you know what? That's not going to make you quite as happy as you think. But being slammed and busy and having no time for yourself definitely makes you less happy. So leisure activity, you know what, does tend to be associated with subjective well-being. And you know what? It turns out that affluent nations, which we'll call cultural, if you will, nations, people in areas that don't struggle as much because of the environment around them, tend to be happier than those cultures where people are struggling. So these are the things that I would say are somewhat important for happiness. And as I suggested, these are all things that have been scientifically demonstrated by measurement and observation. It's not just for you to sit and say what you think makes people happy. The data suggests what things make people really happy and not happy. Now, what is very, very important? It turns out that having a good, intimate, romantic relationship makes people happier. Now, it turns out having a bad marriage will make you unhappier, but people in good marriages tend to be happier than people who are dating or people who are single. And yes, I hate to say this, I'm not conventional, and if you don't want to get married, that's completely up to you. I do not care. I will not judge you. If you want to be in an open relationship, if you want to be married, be attached to several other people, if you want to cohabitate, that is completely up to you. But the research actually suggests that people who are officially married in good marriages tend to be the happiest people of all and tend to have less physical ailments than people who are in romantic relationships or people who are single or divorced. Wow, who knew that happiness, that being married could make you so happy? Now, as I suggested, some people think that having tons of leisure time and not having a job would make you happy. Turns out that that's not true. People who have a job that fulfills them on the inside, where they get a sense of meaning from that job, where they feel proud of what they do, these people who have job satisfaction tend to be incredibly happy people. Now, I don't make a ton of money doing my job, but I absolutely love talking to students and talking about psychology every day. I feel like I'm making a difference. Shh, don't tell me if I'm not. But this sense of doing something good and helping people really gives me a sense of job satisfaction. And I would say that I am an incredibly happy person. So having a job where you're satisfied will really help you be a happy person. And you know, here's the craziest thing. It turns out that people's personality tends to really strongly predict their happiness, okay? People who are extroverted tend to be much more happy than people who are introverted. Does this mean that the extroversion is the key to being happy? No, this is a correlational thing. If you look at this graph I have over here to the left, maybe extroversion causes you to engage in more social activity, and maybe if you engage in more social activity, you tend to be happier. But we do know that if you give people the Big Five personality inventory, those people who score higher on extroversion, or what we would call positive emotionality, tend to report higher levels of happiness. Now, the Big Five personality inventory also measures this quality called neuroticism. Neuroticism is the degree to which you suffer two negative emotions, anxiety and anger. Are you an angry person? Are you an anxious person? I am. When we talk about the Big Five personality test, I'm going to have you take that personality test, and I'm going to show you my scores too. And what you're going to find out is that I'm kind of an anxious person with a bad temper. Now, while I am fairly happy, I could be happier if I wasn't so neurotic. Now, I mentioned genetics and personality here because the crazy thing is there is a strong genetic component to personality. Your personality is going to be similar to your parents' personality. I don't know if any of you can point to one of your two parents and say, wow, I'm really like this parent. And that's because there is a genetic component to personality. You know what? I'm kind of neurotic, and kind of have a bad temper and am kind of anxious. But you know what? My mom, before she died, was the most anxious and angry person you would ever meet. She was always losing her temper. She was always nervous. She was always shaking. She was the most neurotic person in the world. And you know what? I hate to say this, but a lot of times my mom wasn't a very happy person. And so I got this genetic quality from her. And if you would say there is any chink in my happiness, it's because I have this quality that I share genetically with my mother. So if we could, let's go back real quick. Positive psychology is the branch of psychology that scientifically studies what makes people happy and what gives them a sense of well-being. And what we find is some of the things that you think normally would make people happy, like being good looking or having a lot of money, are actually not great predictors of who is going to be happy. On the other hand, being religious, having a set of friends, will make you kind of a happy person. And the crazy thing is, being in a good marriage or having a job that you really love will really make you more likely to be a happy person and to experience a sense of well-being. So, what I want you to, how can I use this information, Chris? Well, here's how you can use this information. If you're not in a good relationship, you can try to find a better relationship, or you can try to improve the relationship that you're in. If you're not a spiritual person, you can try to find a sense of spirituality. If you hate your job and your job is drudgery and makes you sad, go find a job that gives you a sense of value and a sense of self-worth, right? Don't worry about being good looking. Don't focus on the money as much as you focus on the worth of the job. I know you folks are probably saying, Chris, you're crazy. We need money. I hear that. But once you get enough money, don't give up that job for another buck if it's going to a job that you don't like. So what you could do is the same thing that I did when I was 35. That's when I took my first personality test and realized that I was an anxious, angry person. I knew at that time that being an anxious, angry person was not a good predictor of happiness. So one of the things that I've tried to do is work on myself and try to become a person who has a better temper and is less worried about things. And I would have to admit, although I still have a little bit of a temper and I still do tend to get anxious, I've gotten to where I try not to let things bother me as much. So use this information, examine your own life, and see what it is you could do to make yourself a happier person. Before we go on, I'm going to say, having heard what I've said, folks, can you tell me what's one thing you could do to make yourself a little bit happier? I notice we've got 5 people in here. Caleb, you're in here. Eric, you're in here, hopefully. Ivelisse, you're in here as well. What's one thing you could do to improve your level of happiness? Can anybody tell me what's something that's making you unhappy based upon what we just said? Is it your job? Is it your relationship? Is it your temper? I'd be curious. Let's go ahead and see what we have in the chat bar. Do we have any insight you've developed based upon what I've said? Go ahead. I'm going to hum the theme to Jeopardy while you answer. Da 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 da. Dun, 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 dun. I would have a sound effect for that, but unfortunately it's under copyright law, so I had to sing itself. Oh, Caleb's in the love of his life, and that's what's making him happy. Good for you, Caleb. I hope that you, as they say, put a ring on it if you can, because that'll give you the best outcomes in life. Fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing. Does anybody want to share? How many of you have a job that you absolutely love? Or does any of you have a job that you absolutely despise? Anybody? Anybody? You know, crazy thing for me, after my second year of college as a 19-year-old kid, I decided that I hated college and I hated studying and I hated being a responsible person. And my brother was a carpenter, said, hey, you can drop out of school and become a carpenter with me and build houses. And that's exactly what I did. And I did it for 1 year. But I absolutely hated being a house builder. And it was the most miserable time of my life. I was so unhappy. So after 1 year, I reapplied back to UNC Chapel Hill. And now I went back with a renewed sense of purpose. And that led me to the job that I have today, which makes me super duper happy. Ivalise says she could be a bit more social. She's an introvert. That's a good insight, Ivalise. And I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. If I'm not, correct me in the chat bar. Yeah, it's difficult to get outside and of an introverted soul. And you know, if you ever want to get together privately one time, I could give you some strategies that you might use to sort of artificially increase your level of extroversion. If you want to change a personality trait, what you have to do is tell people, you speak it, and then start practicing that. Personality traits are very hard to change, but the key is to speak it and then pretend that you have that trait, even if you don't feel it. And what happens is over time, you actually will come to develop that trait that you don't feel is in your soul. Eric says he could get a better job. Absolutely, Eric. We're all looking for that job that gives us a sense of meaning. And I do hope that you can find a job that maybe gives you a sense of meaning. And the same, oh my God, Noda, you told me your name. Are you, Noda, you're my Ukrainian student, right? I swear to God, I so forgot your name. It's going to take me 2 times to remember it. Go ahead and type your real name in there, Noda, and help me out. Dadgummit, it starts with an M. I know it does, and I've forgotten it. I am so sorry. Dimitro, fantastic. Thank you very much, Dimitro. I promise, second time's a charm. I now have it in my brain. So, positive psychology, the study of happiness. Later on in the semester, we're going to come back and we're going to spend a whole week talking about positive psychology and how you can train yourself to have a more positive outlook on life. Okay, so in the conclusion, here's the deal. Subjective feelings of happiness are more important than objective measures. I can't tell you based upon the amount of money you make whether or not you're happy. That is something personal that you have to decide in your soul. And here's the other thing. It turns out that some people in situations that look absolutely terrible may be extremely happy. So you may say to yourself, why is that poor person so happy? Well, you know what? You don't know. Maybe they were in jail or they were homeless last week. So really, we evaluate our happiness relative to what others around us have and relative to our own expectations. A lot of you have perfectly wonderful lives, but you spend time on Instagram looking at your friends' fake lives, and you say, wow, it looks like Eric or John or Dimitro or Caleb is having a great life and they're so attractive. They must be happier than me. So the crazy thing is, a lot of times if you use what other people have, you will find that you are not as happy a person as you could be. Focus on what you could have that's bad and compare to it what you have now. And you will find that that gives you a better sense of subjective happiness. And you know what? It's often hard for people to predict what will make them happy. I actually have a TED Talk, again by this fellow Dan Gilbert. He's probably one of the most famous positive psychologists. He actually has a TED Talk that I have in here called Why We Make Bad Decisions. And his talk is all about effective forecasting. Most people don't know what's going to make them happy in the future. And people tend to make decisions based upon what they think is going to make them happy when it turns out they are wrong. And one of the things that he says is people think that freedom is the freedom to choose, the freedom of choice makes them happy. And he has data to show that actually when you allow people to choose things on their own, people tend to develop buyer's remorse. That is, they feel bad about the decisions that they make, and that choice actually sometimes makes people less happy than they normally would be. Okay? And here's the deal. People often adapt to their own circumstances. No matter what your situation is, if you focus on the positives that you have in your life and realize how they outweigh the negatives, you can engage in what's known as hedonic adaptation. You can actually learn to adjust your own level of happiness. So what am I saying here? Happiness doesn't come from the outside as much as it comes from the inside. And I know you folks are going to say, Chris, shut up. I hate it when you say this. But happiness is a choice you can make. It is a choice you need to learn how to develop and cultivate in your own life. And I'm not lecturing you, and I'm not judging you if you're an unhappy person. But the science says that you hold the keys to your own happiness. And so what I want you to do as a result of this lecture is to look at yourself, look at the things that you think make you happy, look at the things that are making you sad, and see if you can change your situation or the way in which you view life. And what you're going to find is that this can increase your overall well-being. As I suggested to you in webinar last night, I see this particular course as a manual, a user's guide for how you can live your best life, how you can be most effective, most efficient, and happiness. And so what I want you to do is closely today, over the weekend, think about the factors that make you happy and those things that make you unhappy. And see if you can adjust your viewpoint or your situation in such a way that you can get closer to what it is that makes you happy. Okay. All right, here's the deal. One of the things that I do want you to do over this semester is I want you to learn how to be a better student. How to be a better student. Some people come into college, and I get this all the time, especially from my freshman students. They'll walk into my class and say, I'm a bad student. I can't learn. I have a terrible memory. I'm not going to do well in this class. And these people think of being a good student as something you are either born with or you are not born with. This is wrong. Nothing could be further from the truth. Being a good student is a skill, just like any other skill you might learn. How many of you have ever learned how to play a musical instrument? Were you good at the violin the first time you picked it up? No, you sucked. Were you good at the trumpet or the guitar? No, you sucked. How many of you picked up a sport and weren't good at it to start with? Were you a good basketball player the first time you tried to dribble? Absolutely not. A good painter? Absolutely not. You know what? You probably don't remember this, but the first time you tried to read a book, you had trouble with words like the and of. Reading is a learned skill. Just like all of these things are learned skills, being a good student is a learned skill. So please, 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 I'm going to call you out if you ever tell me, Chris, I am not a good student, because you are wrong and being self-defeatist. Being a good student is a skill that you can learn. I hope I beat that horse enough. Okay, now, what can you do to become a better student? The first thing you can do is learn to schedule yourself. You can get organized. I don't know about you folks, but my first 2 years in college, I was not very organized. I let due dates slip up on me. I didn't study for exams in enough time, and I found myself always under the gun and running behind. I hadn't started that paper in time, so I had to write a 5-page paper the night before it was due. I always woke up the morning of an exam and said, wow, I haven't studied for that math exam or that English exam. I really need to get on that and study now. And I found that I did not schedule my time, and so I always seemed busy and did not have enough time. By the time I got to being a senior in college, I had bought myself a daily planner, and what I did was I went out and scheduled blocks of time every week when I would study for this or write this paper. I wrote in when my exams were coming up so that I could plan my study time out in advance. I planned it out so that if I had two papers due at the same time, I would start one a little bit earlier than the other so I would have plenty of time to do two exams or two papers or whatnot. And the cool thing is, two things happen. Number one, I found out that I had more time. I was no longer rushed. I was no longer realizing that I needed to write that paper the night before it was due. I felt like I had plenty of time, and I actually had more time to go out with my friends and goof off because I had scheduled my study time and I didn't waste my time doing nothing, laying in bed or playing video games. And the second thing that was really exciting to me was my grades got better. My first 2 years of college, my GPA was a 2.5. Not very good. The last 2 years of college, my GPA was a 3.8. Much, much better. And it's all because I decided to become a more responsible student and schedule my time. I got myself a daily planner. And in fact, you know what? I still have a daily planner. And so I schedule in when I'm going to work on my lectures, when I'm going to grade papers, when I'm going to grade exams. And so what you're going to find is that I get things graded more quickly than you would imagine. And I get your attendance grades in, and you're going to say, wow, this Chris is on the ball. It's not because I work harder. It's because I work smarter and schedule my time. Now, probably the best area you can do is to develop this with regard to your study habits. Most of the students who don't do well in my classes do not ever study. They think that they can look over their notes 10 minutes before the exam and remember everything that happened. Memory just doesn't work that way. I'm sorry. You're not a dummy if you can't study for 15 minutes and learn all the material. You are, in fact, a normal human being. So what you need to do is set up a schedule for studying and set up a schedule for times when it's going to work for you. And you know what? You don't have to schedule yourself a 6 or 8 hour scheduling time block. Schedule yourself 20 or 30 minutes at a time. And so if you look over here on the side, here's a sort of a hypothetical schedule of how you could study for your exams and get your work in. So if you'll notice, this person goes from school from 9 to 12 noon. Then they give themselves an hour for lunch, and they spend 2 hours a day studying their notes. Then they take a 2-hour break and they go to work. Now, on Tuesdays, they have a little more spread out schedule and they don't have to go to work, so they decide to do their studying in the evening. And what this person has done is scheduled their responsibilities, going to class, studying, and working, so that they can get all of these activities in. I have students occasionally tell me, I can't come to class today because I'm writing a paper that's due right after your class. And I try not to judge these students, but these students have not planned poorly. You shouldn't have to miss a class in order to prepare for another class. If you do, you're not scheduling your time appropriately. So set up a schedule. And also find a place to study where you can concentrate. You shouldn't be studying in front of your TV at home. If you have children, you shouldn't be studying while the kids are having playtime. You shouldn't really think about studying at work because you can't study and concentrate at work. You need to make sure that you can find a place where you can study and concentrate. I've learned that as an online teacher. I actually can't do work at my house because if I'm at my house, I am sitting in front of the TV, surfing channels, or I am on my laptop goofing off. So even on days that I don't have teaching, like tomorrow is Friday, I'm still going to get up at 8 o'clock and I'm going to come into this stinking, boring office that I have, and I am going to work from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. because I have scheduled those 3 hours, and I found myself a place where I can focus. And you know what? After I spend my 3 hours studying, I'm going to go to the gym and work out for an hour, and then I'm going to go have lunch and a beer. You know why I'm going to do that? Because I have done my homework and my responsibilities. So it's time to reward Chris. So here's the deal. If you want to improve your academic performance, what you need to do is start thinking more systematically about yourself as a student. Set up a schedule, find a place where you can focus, and do not hesitate to reward yourself when you do the right thing. Okay? Now, here's the deal. If you want to do well in this class, you really need to read your textbook. Some students say, hey, Chris, can I just listen to your lectures and look at the PowerPoints? You know, if that's what you want to do, fine. And in fact, that's what I used to do when I was making bad grades as a freshman and a sophomore. But I found that if I did my reading, especially if I did my reading before I went into class, I found that I got more out of the lectures, I learned more, and studying for me was much, much easier. So you should do that as well when you're reading, and it'll help you get more out of your lectures. So, how do you improve your reading? You know what? Before you read, textbooks are typically organized with headings. What I do to get more out of a textbook is open the chapter up, and before you read the text, go ahead and look at the headings to get a general overview for what the chapter is going to be about. So preview the reading assignment section by section. Okay, section 1 is going to be about happiness. Section 2 is going to be about scheduling your time. Section 3 is going to be about reading and lectures. Section 4 is going to be about memory tips. So I have sort of an overview of what I'm going to be reading. Then, as you read the textbook, what you're going to want to do is to actively read the information. And you know what you're going to notice? And what do you mean by actively process the reading? That is, make notes, write stuff in the margins. What you're going to notice about textbooks is most textbooks have huge margins. They don't do that because they want to waste paper. Textbooks put margins so that students can write notes out to the side. If you really, really, really want to get the most out of your reading, after you preview it, while you're reading, write notes, questions that come to mind, comments and insights and how this stuff relates to you. Write in the margins of your textbooks. Because that causes you have to do two things. You have to identify the key areas of each paragraph, and then you actively process that information. And if you relate it to yourself, it is even better. So as you read chapter 1 on happiness and you read the different areas, write out to the notes on the side things that you do that make you happy, that don't make you happy, things where you agree with the book and where you disagree with the book. Make notes. Actively read your material. A textbook is not a novel. You can't turn those pages and crush 350 pages in a day. Textbooks just don't work like that. They're more dense. They require a little more activity on your part. Now, after you finish reading, actively processing, and taking notes, here's what I would do. I would go back and reread the headings that you read before at the beginning. And as you go back through these headings, review what you learned from each of these sections to the degree that you can. Okay, in section 1 about happiness, we found that there are these people called positive psychologists. Okay, section 2, we found that there are some things that are not really related to happiness. What are those things off the top of my head, and how many do I have? So review your textbook. So really, you need to preview, read, and then review your textbook. Those are the 3 steps. And what that's going to do is that going to help you get more information out of your textbook. Use chapter outlines, summaries, and learning objectives. If you look in each chapter, so let's say for chapter 1, if you go to page 1, or actually the page 1, you're going to see that there is an outline that is right there at the beginning of the chapter. And there is an outline in every chapter. Make sure you use that outline. Make sure you use the summaries at the end of each chapter. So for chapter 1, at the end of chapter 1 on page 26, there is a review. It's called the chapter 1. Let's see if I can get this. The chapter 1 review. Notice that there is a chapter review over here. Basically, this is a summary of all the stuff you should have read. And you know what? If you're not going to read the textbook, at least read the review. You'd be surprised how far you can get with the review. And you know what? I highly suggest doing the practice text test at the end of the chapter. It's a short 10-item multiple choice. Doesn't have to take you more than 3 or 4 minutes. And what it'll do is it'll allow you to figure out whether or not you got what you were supposed to get from that chapter. So, improving your reading. Do the preview, read the chapter outline, and look at all the headings to get an idea of what the chapter is going to be about. Read the information and take notes, relating it to yourself as often as possible. Okay? After you get done, read the summary at the end of the chapter, and if there's a short quiz, I would take it. And in fact, I'm going to tell you that some of my homework questions may even come from the chapter quiz at the end of the chapter. I shouldn't have said that, but those of you who came to lecture today just heard a secret that might help you. Okay? Now, here's a go. Tips for getting more out of lectures. When you're listening to a teacher talk, don't zone out. Stay off your stinking phone, right? Listen to the teacher and ask questions. Please, please, please. Teachers love to ask questions because when we're asked a question, we can show you how much we know. So actively listen and ask questions. You know what? As I said earlier, it's best if you can read the textbook before you get to class, or at least read the summary at the end of the test. I promise you it will make the lecture make more sense. Write down what the lecturer is saying. Now, I've provided you a set of PowerPoints, and I feel badly. Some students like PowerPoints, but they can be a crutch. If you don't write down what I'm saying in your own thoughts, the PowerPoints aren't going to be as helpful for you. So please, please, please get in the habit of taking notes and writing down what the teacher's saying in your own words. And you know what? Find out what the instructor thinks is important. I've noticed some teachers like the definitions. Some teachers like the pictures and graphs are in the textbook. Courses in school is like a game. Figure out what your teacher likes, and that's what you spend your time studying, okay? So definitely be an active student. Take control of this education. This is your education, not my education. I've already got one. What I'm trying to do is help you. So be an active consumer. Don't sit on your patootie and waste time. Okay? And then finally, the key to learning is having a good memory. And your book's going to talk about a few different kinds of memory tricks. One of them is overlearning. I had a friend that made a 4.0 at NC State. He would go to class, he would take notes, and then he would go back over after class and he would copy his notes a second time. And then he would go back and read the notes that he had copied a second time. And then he would go back after that and he would copy his notes a third time and use highlighters to highlight the important points. He was overlearning his material. I promise you, trying to remember something one time is never enough. I don't care how smart you are, you need to study your material more than one time. Read your notes 2, 3, 4 times if you can. And there's this thing called distributed practice. If you're only going to give me 3 hours for your exam, then study 3 times for 1 hour rather than 1 time for 3 hours. If you're only going to give me 1 hour studying, instead of studying 1 time for 1 hour, study 3 times for 20 minutes. The more often you study, the more study episodes you have, the better your memory will be. So no matter how much time you're going to give me for studying, break it up into multiple times. This is called the distributed practice effect. All right? And when you study things, you've probably learned all kinds of tricks from your teachers over the years using mnemonic or memory devices to help you remember things. How many of you know what every good boy does? Every good boy does fine. Does anybody know what that relates to, what that acronym relates to? Or how about this one? How many of you know, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally? Does anybody know what please excuse my dear Aunt Sally is? I'll wait for that on the chat board. I know one of you at least has heard, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. What is that? What is that? When somebody answers that, I will stop the class. Does anybody know? Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Every good boy does fine. Anybody know? Every good boy does fine is the notes on the treble clef. E, F, G, B, D, F. Those are the notes on a clef for music. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally is the order of operations for math. Aunt Sally, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, multiplication, addition, subtraction, please, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. Those are the order of operations. That's a mnemonic device. You need to learn memory tricks to stick things in your brain, and this is going to help you be a better student. Okay, we're running out of time. Sorry I ran a little bit late today, but I only took 30 minutes of your time on Wednesday, so I feel like we're sort of evening out those times. Okay, this is sort of a getting started week for the book. I wanted you to know that this book in this class is about helping you live your best life, and positive psychology can help you do that. And then I wanted to give you some tips and tricks that will hopefully make you successful, not only in this class, but in your other class as well. If you folks have any other questions, you can send me a text or an email, and I will be happy to converse with you. Or if you want, we can even set up a meeting and talk in person, okay? Have a great day. Don't forget to do your discussion board, which is due tonight at 11:59 p.m. And don't forget to do your homework, which is due tomorrow night, Friday, at 11:59 p.m. Take care and have a great day. Bye.